Hello, welcome to another tutorial video. Just before I get into the meat of this one, I'd like to point out a couple of things on the channel page. First of all, I've set up a Facebook page so you can share this quite easily with your friends if you think something's of use. Secondly, I've actually set up a Twitter account so you can ask me things publicly rather than through messages. That makes it a lot easier for me, A, to reply to you, and B, it's always there for people to actually look back over questions asked and answers rather than them being private ones. And also, most importantly, I've actually put a list of all the WCS tutorials that I've done. So if you click on that, you'll actually see a list of everything. I've split it into literature, poetry and language, and I'm going to be adding to them daily. Currently I do a lot of my focus on AQA, but I'm going to start doing a lot more OCR stuff. If there's anything else that you want to see added, etc., then just get in touch in any of those modes of communication and I will see what I can do. So we move on now to the Maid, which is an excellent poem, really commenting on the way society actually looks at certain people at certain times, and obviously how people can change, or at least show the facade of a change, etc. So I'm going to read through it first and foremost, just so you kind of follow what's actually being said, and then we'll go into the analysis. Oh, Amelia, my dear, this is such a great thing seeing you. Who would have imagined that I would see someone like you here back in this town and wearing such lovely things, showing how well you're doing? And then she says, Amelia responds, oh, didn't you know that I'd actually shamed myself? And the illusion here is I shamed myself sexually somehow. When you left us, you had like beggar's clothes. You didn't even have shoes or socks. And you were always complaining of how tired you were from digging up potatoes and weeding the fields. And now you've got like lovely jewelry, and then you've got lovely ornaments in your clothes as well. And she says, yes, that's how we dress when we've shamed ourselves. Obviously she's sarcastic in these lines. And at home, where we actually grew up and we were together, you used to speak like us and say things like this, but now the way you actually sound, it sounds like you're you hang around with a much more esteemed or a much classier crowd. And he says, yes, some good can happen to you when you shame yourself sexually. Back then your hands were like paws, and your face was blue from the cold and long hours you used to work, and bleak from obviously the prospect of your life. But now I'm completely in wonder and awe at how beautiful your face is, and your little gloves fit on you as if they would on any, and I suppose you could read that, or for a real lady. And then she mocks her again. He says, we never do work when we never do that kind of work, at least when we shame ourselves. And she says, well, you used to say that living here was just a horrible situation and a horrible time for you, and you would sigh and you would moan. But now you actually seem like you don't know the idea of headaches from worry and obviously tiredness and sadness, etc. And he says, yes, that's true. Things are actually quite good when you shame yourself sexually. I wish, and then she says, the interrogator here, or the person who stopped, says, I wish I had lovely clothes and all the things that you have, and such a beautiful face, that doesn't have to work hard. And I wish I had the time to just kind of walk around and show myself off around town. And then the response comes, well, my dear, someone as raw and plain as you can't expect that, because you haven't shamed yourself. You haven't done what it takes to improve your situation. Okay, and I suppose I should point out in that, ruin, shame yourself sexually, obviously, is with moving towards a person of higher class or something, or, a person who can kind of give you the lift up. Gold digging is, I suppose, what the term is, but forgive me if I'm outdated with that term. Okay, so we look then at the analysis. Right, lots to get into. So first of all, we've got this idea of this conversation, and that's really interesting because, it gives us two very clear voices. It puts us there and it's first hand, and at the same time, that kind of gives us a kind of a a picture of, you know, kind of conversations that would happen in such times between women who, you know, whose reputations or fortunes have actually changed dramatically, etc. Obviously it's not so much an issue now, but obviously at the time, you know, when you know, kind of sexual freedom or sexual flaunting was far more frowned upon, obviously in Hardy's time, I think it was written in the 1860s, then obviously that, you know, it was really important then. But now, you know, people do that, and you know, it's almost expected, unfortunately. We've got the rhyming couplets all the way: crown, town, tea, she, socks, dogs, sorry, prosperity, she, dogs, socks, three, she. And the idea here is just kind of gives us a very kind of giddy, fast moving poem, but it's also very ironic, because although the tone or the cadence, the rhythm, sounds like it's actually quite a fun, happy thing, it's not a happy tale at all. No one in this poem is kind of happy or doing well. You've got the person on the one hand that's obviously jealous, or seemingly jealous, or at least too simple, you know, to understand how hurtful the things she says are. And we've got this other person who has to be on the defense, and then obviously, you know, knows that their reputation isn't great. So, you know, it's not a very happy situation to be in. And obviously in that kind of structure that you've got there, you've got the way it's set up, actually, you've kind of got this person talking to Amelia and then Amelia responding, and that happens in each stanza. And that's really interesting, because you can look at it two ways. Because you can look at, is this person, you know, the farmer girl, is still simple, so she just says what's on her mind, you know, without thinking about it. And then the person who's responding, you know, just being kind of ironic, you know, that it's lost on this farmer girl, this raw country girl. You know, she doesn't really kind of get the irony that's coming through in what she says, and that's why she just kind of keeps continuing. You could read it that way, or you could read it as a kind of like, or more of a battle. So here you've got the cattiness coming out from the first person who's actually talking to them, and then you've got this sarcasm coming from Amelia, you know, where she just kind of gives as good as she gets. And it's really interesting, actually, because of the way it ends, when she actually kind of cuts her off with this patronizing "my dear," and obviously the poem ends just saying, like, you know, well, you haven't done what it takes to actually get to this situation. And that's really interesting, because it's the only time where she actually has two lines in a stanza, where everywhere else she just has one. So, excuse me, you know, that kind of, again, maybe shows the level of conversation and sophistication she's actually got to. She can actually close this conversation up, especially when she said that earlier, the person speaking to her actually says that, you know, you used to speak just like me, and then we can imagine that she used to have the kind of same argument, same level of vocabulary, same arguments, etc. But obviously one person has gone to try and improve their life in some way, and then obviously you can question whether this is even an improvement, but I've actually gone on about that point too long. Sorry, I'll move on. I really like the use of the dash here and the structuring, because, you know, it's used a couple of times, and it's used in two different ways. So here, obviously, you've got a lot of reference to kind of the dialect here, and obviously the way that kind of words aren't spelled properly, etc., and the contractions that are there. But then we've got the dash here in company and lady, and obviously you could just say that was to do with the obviously you've got it all the way through in melancholy and obviously prosperity at the top, but you could say, well, that's just dialect, and you can, but another way of actually looking is perhaps that it's you know, kind of mocking her, like, you know, lady, you know, like her being sarcastic, you know, depending on which reading you want to take about it. And it's always good to kind of mention multiple ways that something can be taken, you know, to kind of put it that way. But then also with the dash, and that's why I think it's really interesting in this poem, you've got the dash used here by Amelia, and you know, it's kind of used for a very kind of distancing pause, you know, cutting the other girl away from it, just as before she kind of cuts her off completely. And she says, oh, sorry, and we've actually got this third voice, obviously, because, you know, there's someone talking, you know, watching this or hearing this, etc., and obviously reporting it. But you know, that's by the by. So yeah, you've got this dash here, you know, that just kind of cuts it off, and so it's very kind of distancing, and we can imagine a pause in that dash here, as if Amelia just kind of looks down her nose at her, or just kind of like, you know, looks her up or down, or just kind of, you know, takes a moment to kind of, you know, just be repulsed by her before she calls her a raw country girl, and obviously ends this conversation. So we move on then to meanings, themes, images. Well, the idea obviously that comes through is the reputations of people. Obviously, you know, this person, you know, obviously, like, people have been talking about her as if, you know, she should be shamed, and she should be ashamed of whatever she's doing. But then at the same time, you know, her reputation, you know, materialistically, obviously it's gone up. You know, she has more, you know, she speaks better, she acts better, and so the idea there of reputations, what people do, kind of present certain reputations, etc. And we do get the feeling that this Amelia is only putting on the idea, could be only putting on the idea of having improved, because obviously she says such as you be, you know, that's a bit informal for someone who's supposed to be more educated now, and, you know, kind of better versed in etiquette. And here, when she says, obviously she's got a contraction in her own, when she says you ain't, so again it kind of, she slips there. So we've got this idea of the images that people try and hold up for themselves, and obviously try and let other people think of them. You know, you can dress the way you want, but then, you know, you can't keep it up 100% of the time. Perhaps that's what's going on. So we've also got one of the meanings of, obviously, envy and bitterness. Envy is supposedly when someone has something and you want it, but you don't necessarily want them to have it. Whereas jealousy is someone having something and you want it and you don't want them to have it. It's an interesting way of looking at the two. So, I mean, would you say the person here was more envious or jealous? Well, again, it's completely up to you. But one thing we do pick up on, I definitely feel that it's, you know, she's not kind of just simple, just kind of, you know, just, you know, hammering this out stupidly. I think she is very bitter, and it's kind of very, very kind of obvious from here, because she says, you know, I wish I had, and then obviously the link there with the word feathers, and then the link straight after with the word strut. So it's kind of like strutting around like a peacock. So you got the idea of showing off, and like she's basically saying, you know, you are showing off. And I don't think it's very accidental that those kind of, well, from the girl has used those words, it seems like very much like she's being quite bitter towards her. And obviously then you can kind of tie it into the whole kind of idea of society, you know, people who kind of mock other people who do well, or mock other people for kind of getting to certain levels. You know, anyone, whoever they are. I mean, I suppose Jordan's an interesting example. I mean, a lot of people have a dislike for her because of what she's done with what she has. Interestingly, someone told me a statistic the other day that she's actually written 96 books, which means she's a best-selling author, made millions just from books alone, which I find amazing. And obviously the person actually telling me this was a writer, and they were quite bitter about it, so it just kind of brings that to mind. Excuse me for the digression. We got the idea here of someone using their sexuality, you know, to kind of get ahead, you know, because obviously she's kind of shamed herself here. You know, maybe she's, you know, married someone just for money, or, you know, she's just kind of pretending to be of a higher class to get with someone that has money. We don't know, but all we do know is that it's worked, you know, whatever's actually happened here. And it's kind of the idea here of, you know, perhaps obviously Hardy was commenting on the idea of, you know, how women will use the only device available to them for actual kind of social mobility, you know, the sexual prowess at the time, because men had kind of blocked off, you know, voting and education and etc, etc, etc. So, you know, maybe he's kind of commenting on that, saying, you know, that's what you had to do, and maybe women are well within their rights to do it. So obviously you can look into that as far as you want. And we've got the idea here of, I think I've touched upon this, of the social pretenses, you know, pretending in like different societies. So we've got both people here. We've got the Amelia pretending to be a lady, even though obviously she knows about her reputation, and she doesn't actually kind of regard herself like that, especially when she kind of lets it slip at the end, but she knows she's better off than this raw country girl. And we've also got the idea of her friend, you know, who's actually, or this woman who stops her, should I say, you know, pretending to be happy to see her. You know, that's again just a kind of a polite societal idea. You know, it's just the kind of like, you know, the kind of the airs or the voice that we put on with certain people just to be polite and fake. You know, it's just not really how we're feeling. So, you know, again here she starts off by saying, "Oh, isn't it great to see you?" And then she spends the rest of the poem insulting her. So it doesn't really go. What images do we have then? We get images of elements of a wealthy life and elements of a mundane life, you know, just kind of an empty life. So obviously you got then the gay bracelets, the bright feathers, but then, you know, she used to have hands like paws, and she never even had socks and shoes. And again, that's brilliant, because it's very ridiculous. You know, obviously it's true as well, but it's just kind of very ridiculous. It just kind of makes things kind of simple, and, you know, it's a real insult from the other person. So that line there serves quite a lot. We've also got the idea of the nonchalance of Amelia, in the fact that, you know, she's just, even when she says, "Oh, don't you know," again, she's just kind of mocking. You know, she's not really that bothered. That's why the other person speaks a lot and she doesn't say very much. You know, perhaps she's very aware of what she's done and why she's done it, etc. "Oh, don't you know I've been ruined?" And then again she goes, you know, she just keeps kind of mocking this game side of things, and it's just, you know, very distant. After she says "I'd" here, you know, it's all we and one and we, sort of we're. So again, it's very distant. It's very distancing. You know, she doesn't kind of associate herself just with her her own actions, she's saying, well, those of us that have done well have ruined ourselves to do it. But even in that, there's an irony in that, and it's kind of like, well, why should you have to ruin yourself in other people's estimations if that's important to actually make something of yourself in that way. And one like really nice image as well. So in the image of that, you kind of just got this image of a person who's just kind of like blasé and not really bothered about what the other person's saying. She's not going to let people who only have negative things to actually say affect her. Excuse me, I really was just the words, she's not going to let haters hate were coming to my mouth, and I just didn't want to use that as in my first description. We've got here the face representing feelings and status, and that's really interesting because here we have the face here when she's actually saying you've got your face was blue and bleak and now you have a delicate cheek, and I just think it's a really nice contrast, obviously, because it kind of sums up obviously how well taken care of someone is, kind of perhaps the products that they can use on their face, basically the hardships that they are subjected to or no longer subjected to. So it's really interesting to pick that up. And also the idea in here in kind of status, kind of the Amelia actually putting a facade up or a face up of being kind of higher class, etc. But then perhaps deep down she's still that country girl, and she is putting on a facade and being fake about it. Language, then we get the actually one thing that isn't there I should actually mention is first of all the idea here of the Amelia herself, when she's actually mentioned, we can presume quite safely that could be Amelia, and obviously when she's in her esteemed company then she's referred to properly, but here it's just Amelia, and obviously you can imagine with the more countrified accent, which I'm not going to do an impression of, it would it sounds all the more ridiculous contracted rather than the rather sophisticated Amelia. The dialect slip, yes, I've mentioned that several times, in language, so that's the contraction actually there to actually show the dialect, etc. The use of the one and the we, I've actually mentioned that before as well. Apologies suggests lots of other people do it. That's something worth remembering. Obviously, it's not just her that's in this situation. And the use of the word raw, and that's raw. Obviously, I really like that because you can look at it so many different ways. It's kind of raw in that you haven't actually learned the ways of the world. Raw in that you haven't got maybe the beauty or the something going for you that's actually gonna get other people's attention, and obviously raw as an insult, you're just not good enough. So you can look at that in kind of several ways, and then obviously you can look at words like the idea of a sweeping gown. The sweeping gown is just kind of like a really, the onomatopoeia there is really strong, and we just imagine this kind of really long flowing gown, so it helps to build a really nice picture for us, and obviously, like I mentioned earlier, strut as well. So effect on us, and sorry this has been so long, what will people, it kind of makes us think about what people will do to get ahead, how they'll actually try and improve their lives, by what kind of means, and is this woman right or wrong to do it, especially in this world. Don't try and think about it now and just think about the situation. Then you think about in a situation where she had, probably would have had very little access to education, probably wouldn't have had, any kind of, support, etc., or kind of funding that she could go and turn to. She probably would have had to, start working since she was 12, just kind of working, 6.5 days a week, or sorry, 6 days a week apart from church. So you have to kind of think of the situation she's in, what would she do to get ahead, etc. And also kind of like gets us thinking about, how people remember us, how people will talk about us, especially, if we move on and actually improve, will people say this, that, or the other about us? And also kind of thinking about looking down at others, once people move past or out of the kind of situations or social situations that they were in, does that suddenly give them the right to look down on people, or does that suddenly give them the right to try and show their roots, etc.? Again, it's all open there to take in. And obviously the idea, another thing we should actually think about is just the running contradiction. This is a lovely running contradiction all the way through the poem about just this kind of cheerfulness at the meeting and the cheerfulness of the rhyme. It's just coupled with she obviously had to do something that is frowned upon. What does she think? Does she frown upon it? And obviously the whole thing is just really, really catty. So yeah, I think it's super in that sense, and obviously it's well worth a long analysis. Apologies for that.